It's past 8. Well, Mike McRoberts, of course, you'll know him from TV3, the journalist and also news presenter. He's got a book out called Beyond the Frontline. Going Beyond the Frontline expands on the events that have taken him to many of the world's war zones and disaster areas and gives an insightful account of his experiences of the warfare, the devastation, the sadness, and also the humour in surprising places as well. Mike McRoberts joins me in the Kiwi studio. Good morning, Mike.
Morning, Glenn. How are you?
Very well. In fact, you've just come back from a conference over in the Philippines talking about this as well.
Yeah. I was invited by the International Red Cross to go and speak at a conference on war reporting and the safety of journalists, and it was an amazing experience, actually. There would have been 30 or 40 journalists from around Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and we spent a day sort of giving addresses and then coming up with a Manila Declaration, which was all about the safety of journalists.
It would be fair to say that journalists in these types of situations, warfare, are not safe, are they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at sometimes the intimidation and the physical threats that journalists in places like Indonesia and Thailand and also in the Philippines face on a daily basis, and that's real courage to go out and do your job. And I just was really moved by some of their stories.
I was thinking, because sometimes you attend certain situations but not others. I was wondering what the criteria is inside the newsroom to decide whether or not you go to a particular place to cover a story.
Well, it's about the first thing is can we get there, and can we get there in time to do the story? And so we had an example this year with Tripoli. I've been following that story for months, since the Arab Spring, and we'd all sort of been geared up to go to Libya and to go to Tripoli, but then it unfolded so quickly. Sort of Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, they were in there, and that part of the story at least was over. So it would have taken us 2.5 days to get there. Money's a big issue too, particularly in the last couple of years, and every media industry's faced the same thing. Funnily enough, one of the comments at this seminar or conference in Manila was that actually the safety of journalists has improved dramatically by the global financial crisis, and that companies just can't afford to send reporters to wars anymore.
And the newsroom is looking for a return on the investment of sending you over?
Yeah, in the bluntest possible way, yes. I mean, we need to be, we need to have probably a week's worth of stories. Is it a news story that is going to spike after the first or second day and be of lesser interest? That kind of thing. We need to know what we're going to get, or at least have some idea. And so quite often, if I go to a place and doing 60 minutes as well means that I can, in terms of a return for that investment, do news and maybe put together a 60 minutes piece as well. So it becomes a bit more, a bit more viable.
Bang for the buck.
Absolutely.
There has been no shortage, though, of stories over the past 2 or 3 years, and particularly, of course, locally this year.
It's been unlike any other year I've ever known. Maybe 2005 was quite big with the bombing in London, and it started off with the tsunami and that kind of thing. But this has just been a crazy year.
Yeah,
really has. From the flooding and the cyclones in Queensland to obviously the Christchurch earthquake, and then we had tornadoes. We had Osama bin Laden found and executed, and the London riots, the shootings in Norway. It just goes on and on and on. But the amazing thing is just how quickly these stories are being received and done with. These stories that would last for months normally are just over so quickly, and it's just the news cycle these days. And I don't know whether it's because we've got so much more access to these stories, but the news cycle of big stories is over so much more quickly.
Yeah, and that's because the next big story is happening, and everyone has to move on.
Yeah, and look, it's hard to imagine that there could be another story that might be bigger, but this year it's certainly been the case.
But the problem is, though, the story for the individuals who are involved, the story doesn't move on for them, does it? So how do you know when a story is done? Personally, obviously, I guess you've got to get back to the newsroom, but is that a hard thing to do? Is it hard to leave?
Yeah, it is. And I think back to Christchurch, which is my hometown, and so I was there and reporting for 3 weeks and presenting the news for 3 weeks. And on that last week, probably about the middle of the week, I discussed with my boss that it was probably time to head back to the studio. So on Friday I presented the news from Beeley Ave in Christchurch and headed to the airport and was getting ready to fly to Auckland when the first pictures of the Japanese tsunami came through, and so I actually just flew into the domestic terminal at Auckland, grabbed my car and drove round to the international and hopped on a plane to Osaka. And so 24 hours later was presenting the news from Tokyo. And that was another week away. So it's kind of been like that this year. It's just been nuts.
And those are definitely scenarios where you do need to be on the ground and you do need to be, reporting on the situation there. But what do you make of the move by newsrooms these days to sort of, to live cross to all kinds of places, reporters in front of buildings and things that don't really tell the story behind the story?
Yeah, it's certainly become a feature of our news, and sometimes the crosses can seem a bit superfluous. Yeah, particularly if it's a court story and you're standing outside the court and the trial or whatever.
Or I think a recent, I can't remember what network it was on, but reporting outside Auckland Airport, because apparently the criminal had passed through that airport 3 months earlier.
Right. It's the Westpac.
Yes. Yeah.
Winner. What am I talking about?
Well, it was like winning a lottery, wasn't it? These are strange situations. Yeah, but I guess that is it the Americanization of news worldwide, or what is it?
A little bit. I think it's a sort of a catch-22 situation in some ways, because I think our audience expects live as well, and this year and also the end of the last year, we've had rolling coverage for big news events. But I think it can lift a story, and sometimes it is new information that reporters are waiting for. It's a tough one. The other thing too is that we're constantly trying to make the news interesting and broaden its appeal. And so that's part of it too. But,
and how do you deal with that because you're a hard news journalist at heart. And how do you deal with the going from hard news to fluff, and also
Justin Bieber arriving?
Yeah, well that's right, and dealing with also the hierarchy of news in the hour, which is not decided by you, obviously, but some stories may seem to take precedent over the others that just don't deserve it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean.
Do you just bite your tongue?
Well, no, we being a senior journalist, self and Hillary, often have input into what we think should be there, but ultimately it's not a democracy. The newsroom, and we have a 6 o'clock producer who is in charge of that, and even so, like even our head of news and current affairs won't have an overriding input into that, because this person has to do their job. And so it can be a little frustrating sometimes when you think that a particular story should have got more airtime. But that's life, really. It's you can't do too much about it. And I think we get it right, sort of 9 times out of 10.
Let's talk about, though, when you are reporting overseas, how has technology changed over the years in getting the story back?
Oh, massively. It's just we can go and do so much more these days. We've had our little sort of SNG portable satellite systems which we use in New Zealand and sometimes around the Pacific. We've had those for about 6 or 7 years now, and that means we can do those live crosses from wherever we want to go.
But these days now we're seeing, particularly from places like Egypt and Libya, we're seeing a lot of what look like sort of a little bit grainier internet feeds back from a reporter standing.
Yeah, that's been one of the key developments in the last couple of years, is the use of a BGAN satellite phone, which is it looks similar to a small laptop, and it's for the transfer of data only. And so what you can do is, it's pretty similar to Skype. And you can actually do a cross that way, and we've been sending our stories that way. We've been interneting our stories for a couple of years now. It's meant we've been able to go into places like Afghanistan and file out stories or other fairly remote places, and not be tied to going to a conventional satellite company and having to do a live cross that way. The speeds are still not flash. And that means that they are pretty grainy pictures, but it's going to get better and better. And we saw, with the fall of Tripoli, a reporter was just using basically a laptop with the camera in it, and holding the laptop up and doing a report that way.
And it works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As long as the sound is good enough. because that's really the key thing, is getting the message through in sound as well.
Yeah, and audiences are pretty forgiving if it's immediate and it's
Yeah.
happening. I mean, because they just want to see the pictures, like like all of us. But you get it's a real deconstruction in that sense of what's going on, because it's live, and you're just seeing it as it unfolds, and the reporter is often more of a commentator than a reporter, and so it's moving away from the the traditional putting together a story.
Yeah.
I still think the stories are really important, and I think that's in the future that's going to be what determines what happens with television is the content.
I bet the family breathed a sigh of relief that you didn't go over to Libya, because it was pretty dangerous over there when the fighting was in full force. Does family play a part in the decision-making process about going somewhere?
Yeah, it does, or they do. But in many of the cases, I've got a 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. In many of the cases, I could be heading to Invercargill and it'd still be the same issues. It's about childcare, and my wife's in the Philippines at the moment. We didn't go on the same trip, but she's gone over there to do a story for 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
So it does play a part, but those risk assessments I make and the way we prepare for a trip like that don't change. It's not they don't change because my family are concerned. I mean, I'm as concerned as they are before I head away.
Most memorable news events over the past couple of years or so?
Well, Christchurch was hugely significant for me because I'm from there, and probably before that, I'd have to say Haiti was of all the wars and terrible things I've seen. Haiti was the worst, absolutely the worst, and still is. I mean, there was the year anniversary earlier this year, and I think the reports were saying that 2% of the rubble had been cleared up. So it looks like it just happened yesterday.
Yeah,
shocking.
And I'd imagine you make a lot of friends along the way as well.
Yeah, you do, and and I couldn't do the job without the amazing support and generosity of people that we've met along the way. Haiti, we slept on someone's back porch. In other places, we've been welcomed into homes, we've been fed. I think being a New Zealander really helps. I think we're kind of less threatening and much more easy to get along with, and people like us. So that really helps a lot. But it's you just it's a continually meeting people, kind of networking, finding out what's going on, being immersed in that sort of environment, and as much as you can, getting a handle of what's going on. So
back here in New Zealand, and I know this is sort of hard for us to cover, both being inside the same company that pays our way and makes sure that we do have a job and doing what we love. But what do you make of the state of the media landscape in New Zealand? Because a report came out recently that there's only two main companies that own most of the media in New Zealand, and we've got a fledgling public broadcaster, a TV channel that's probably going to go off air next year, and a radio station, a public service radio station that has its funding frozen. A threat to democracy, it's being called. Would we be better served with a funded public broadcaster, one that...
I mean, I get asked this quite a bit, and I think people assume because I work for a private company, for MediaWorks, that I'd be against that, but I'm not. I think it'd be fantastic if we had proper public broadcasting, like the ABC in Australia, for instance, or SBS, or PBS in America, or the BBC, I guess, in the UK. I think that would be wonderful for New Zealand. It's just a real shame we haven't gone down that track. It's pretty hard to try and get that started now, isn't it?
And something that didn't have the commercial imperative that it wasn't a commercial imperative that drove the news agenda.
Yeah, because we're seeing now, and a lot of it's about resources, but the small amount of resources that we have, and I'm not just talking about MediaWorks, I'm talking about pretty much every media organisation, is very much going on breaking news rather than kind of developing news stories and investigative pieces, that kind of thing. And so it starts feeling a bit shallow, if I can say that. And it's not a criticism of my colleagues or any of the great journalists who work in our industry. It's more that we're getting fed a diet of the same sort of stuff. We see a little bit of it with the gallery. You've got reporters there who are able to dig in and find some stuff out and break stories that way. Duncan Garner from TV3, of course, is Patrick Gower.
Patrick Gower doing some great work at the moment. Yeah,
Rebecca Wright have done some wonderful stories, and we're very, very lucky to have them.
But there's that temptation, though, particularly outside of the elections, the election time, to concentrate on sort of the more salacious, kind of fluffy stuff, really, rather than policy and what actually matters to the public.
Yeah. Well, with so much going on lately, with the Rugby World Cup and with what was happening in Libya, and then of course, with Arena. For a politician to get in the news these days, he or she has to have done something really wrong, rather than, as you say, rather than explore what the policies are about. And, it's hard to imagine, isn't it, that we've got an election coming up in 4 to 5 weeks, or maybe just everyone is, kind of looking at the polls and thinking, well, why would we be bothering? But
although this big news event that you weren't in the country for, it is getting political, and it looks like it may affect the election in some way.
I can't see it, to be honest. I think I just think at the moment
it's a one-way street.
It is, and no matter what Labour or anyone else sort of comes up with, it doesn't seem to be making much of a dent.
Interesting. Well, the book from Mike McRoberts is out now. It's called Beyond the Front Line, out through HarperCollins. Really appreciate your time here in the Kiwi studio this morning.
Pleasure
to talk about it.
See you.
Mike McRoberts.